Live by the audience. Hello, all you people out there. We are on webinar number 3 for PandaDoc. This is Marylou Tyler speaking. And with me is my pal, Max. Say hi, Max.
Hello. Hello, Marylou.
Don't start singing.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I'm just, I'm still jazzed up about going through this process. So let's hit them with it.
Okay, very good. So for all of you joining today, thank you so much for spending your 45 minutes with us. My name is Marylou Tyler. I am a person who specializes in top-of-funnel business, sales, development, and I wrote a couple books. First one was Predictable Revenue in 2011 with Aaron Ross, and my most recent book is Predictable Prospecting. But I actually, people don't know this, but I actually wrote with a client, and the client, Jeremy Donovan, was all about me getting my work out there for everyone, because I usually just work one-on-one with people, and he said I was doing a service to our community. So predictable prospecting is a result of that. Now, for those of you who missed it, we had 3 parts to this webinar series. Part 1 topic really covered the first 3 chapters of the book, which focused on targeting. We talked about a SWOT 6, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but we overlaid it with 6 different ways of looking at your market, where you fit, why you matter, and it allows you to really focus on, what your value prop is. So we encourage salespeople to go through this, as well as managers, because the sales folks, believe it or not, start internalizing the value proposition. Because if I woke them all up at 3 in the morning and asked them why they mattered, in work-wise, that is, and they would be able to tell me that. So it's really a good exercise. Then we focused on the ideal account profile, which is similar to the ICP, ideal customer profile, in predictable revenue, although we've added some features to that and some blocks of development, because we found we were missing a few things as we started working these constructs in the field. The last thing is the ideal prospect profile. This was never discussed really in predictable revenue, and we took a real deep dive on this. I think if you read chapter 3, you'll enjoy what you need to do in terms of building an ideal prospect profile for sales. In part 2, we started working through the engagement process. We did a little bit of email and phone scripts. I talked to you all about the 5 levels of awareness that we, as outreach development, business development experts, we have to really deal with, because we're targeting accounts. We don't really know the level of awareness that they're in when we reach out. When they're doing inbound work, typically, since they're engaging with us, that sort of tells us that they're either interested or evaluating, they know about us. Whereas when we're going outbound and outreach to people, we have 3 other levels to worry about, which is the unaware level, for those of you selling disruptive products. There is the problem aware, meaning that they know there's a problem, but they don't know a solution. And then there's the solution aware level, where they know there's a problem, they know there's a solution, but they're not sure of all the vendors that can solve their problem. So we talked about that. We also talked about multi-touch, multi-channel sequencing, and I showed some pictures of that. And then we went through some disqualifications. I talked to you about the rhythm of disqualification, the AWAF call, which is an Are We a Fit, and the disqualification call through the BANT, or whatever process you use to determine need, fit, maybe timing, and maybe money. Now, today we're going to talk about is optimizing. So we've got our assemble done. We're activating. We're actually pushing records through the active pipeline. And now we're going to look at how do we optimize this thing so that we can create a consistent stream of revenue that, if we want to, we can scale. So once again, it always seems to come down to 3 things. This 3 theme has been pretty much, I think, throughout all the webinars. But the power of 3 for improvement and continuous improvement, which for those of you who understand the lean methodology, we borrow a lot of those concepts, is leveraging people, leveraging process, and then also leveraging technology. So under the people side, we're going to talk about first is the leadership, the daily workflows, the rhythms of the SDR. Then we'll switch to process, which is looking at the actionable metrics that we track in the pipeline to determine predictability. And finally, technology, which is all those wonderful pieces of software that are confusing a lot of us, but that also we're going to talk about function versus form in that area. So starting with people, the purpose really is to lead an effective outreach program and to establish the daily habits and rhythms of the SDR, BDR, ADR, whatever you're calling your outreach folks, those people who are targeting accounts. And it all begins really with leadership. So the first thing I want you guys to do, especially managers in the audience, is to look at this table, because a lot of the things I see in my world when I'm out with clients is that there are traditional sales managers that are trying to run a business development organization. And as you can see from the right side, the traditional sales manager runs his department or her department differently really than a business development manager. So take a look at this table and kind of evaluate yourself to see where you're at, because you can see where on the left side, we need daily monitoring, daily leadership on the BDM side, business development manager side, versus usually traditional sales managers are monthly or quarterly looking at numbers. They may do weekly, but a daily thing is not usually in the rhythm of a traditional sales manager. The next area is that we are hunters. You know, like I like to say that we're speed dating mostly in the business development manager side. So it's different than establishing relationships with our clients, which is more of the AE role and farming. The other thing is the team experience is usually less on the business development side than on the AE side. So managers really have to do a lot more hand-holding and definitely a lot more policing, for lack of a better term, and making sure that their folks are doing the habit of business development. The next thing I want you to look at, especially this is interesting for PandaDoc folks, because this whole business of in-house versus outsourced, there are a lot of, I guess when we first wrote Predictable Revenue, we were not very excited about outsourced. But now I noticed Aaron is changing his mind about it. I'm still sort of on the fence of in versus out, but there are definitely spots where outsourcing will help. In the area of content creation, in the area of document handling, I think that those are areas where outsourcing and getting additional help for the team to put together the actual assets that we need in order to generate qualified opportunities is really needed. The other thing is you can do a hybrid, which is what I do, where the talent pool is still in-house, meaning the SDRs work in-house. They're not outsourced SDRs, which I still don't agree with. I like them in because that way they're going to build the culture, they're going to understand the products, they'll be able to do a lot more with this conversation if they are in-house people. But I think definitely having the templates built for them of content assets and where they should be moving through the pipeline, what kind of content to grab when, is something I think they can do both in and out. The low number of leads really is, outsourcing is great for solos, you know, for people who don't need, like me. I mean, I don't need a lot of leads a month because it's just me servicing clients. I don't have any intention of growing. So 3 to 5, leads a month is like, whoa, that's a lot for me because I only service a very small number of clients. So that's another time where, you may consider outsourcing to get things rolling, or sometimes you want to pivot and go for a new vertical and you have a limited number of records. If you have a process already in place, you can dump that process on your outsourcer and make sure they follow it, and then try different verticals. That's another use of outsourcing I think works really well. Now we're going to talk about hiring. I did actually an entire webinar yesterday just on hiring. So for those of you who are really into that and want to listen to my voice drone on for 45 minutes, it was that page 178 and 179 in the book I extrapolated to a gigantic webinar. So I can send you the link. It's on YouTube right now. But basically what we want to do is we want to be able to attract and hire smart, conscientious, articulate, early career individuals in the SDR role. And we have to be able to attract them via a really good job description. So in that webinar I did yesterday, I actually shared a job description that Jeremy, my co-author, uses currently because he's still working for a company in that role. And so we shared that, and there are 4 components of a job description that you're really going to want to make sure you include. So because we have fast and furious pace here, I couldn't go through all of the detail on that, but just reach out to me, and my information at the end, I'll give you my information so you can reach out to me, and I'll send you that link. Essentially, we want to be able to do jargon-free as much as possible, but giving them strict requirements of what they have to do versus what it'd be nice that they do. The other thing that I see all the time that people do wrong when they're hiring is they just do a face-to-face interview or a virtual interview of the person, but they don't actually role play them in the job. So one of the things, takeaways for today is if you're in the hiring capacity, not only are you going to do a face-to-face interview, but you should test them on the job itself. Have them write an email. Have them leave you a voicemail. Have them role play objections with you. You're probably saying, well, how am I going to do that when they don't know my product? It doesn't matter. When I did this, when I was an SDR, I picked a topic that I was passionate about, which at the time was creating tamari balls, which are, what are they? They're like string balls that you make in geometric patterns. It's a Japanese art. So I talked all about that. I did a presentation on the phone about it. I answered objections about it. And so that's what you want them to do. Select something they know really well, because that's how they're going to know your product really well, and then work them through the objections and do the common objections. You know, I'm already happy, thanks a lot, what's this about? You know, we're satisfied with our supplier, I'm not interested right now. And just to see how they respond to that, because that's how they're going to be on the phone live. I would say probably 20% of my clients had done that before I got there and changed how they hire, because our successes were so low if they didn't do that. And in the book, it tells you that if you do it face-to-face, you're like 14% effective. But if you add in this role-playing, it bumps it up tremendously. It's almost like, I think, 13 to 15 points above that 14% if you do role-playing. So then the next thing to consider is your product and hiring sales experience based on the average deal size of your product. Now, this is coming out of the Bridge Group, Trish Bertuzzi, and they did a survey in 2014 and came up with these numbers. But if you look at this graph, the higher the average deal size is, the more experience you're going to need from your SDR. So the 100K plus mark, they're looking for 2.3 years of experience in sales. Most of the time, we're getting fresh outs out of college that are selling these products, and there's a definite gap there. So, you know, think about that as you're going through that hiring process of where do you fit in this range, and look for people who are in that sales experience tenure. Otherwise, you're going to be training and ramping up longer than you want. The next thing we're going to talk about is the actual business development management role. Where does it reside? The studies that we looked at, 75% of that role is in the sales department and 25% is in marketing. So if you are a PandaDoc provider and you're working strictly with marketing now, then we're going to have to, you know, get our sales muscles up a bit, because these products and things for VDMs that we're talking about in these webinars really reside mostly in the sales area. So if you're not connected in with the directors of sales in your clients, start making those relationships, because this type of pipeline is usually in the sales area. The other thing is that we're looking at active managers, meaning that we have to be able to be with our folks on a daily basis and manage them through the process daily. The other thing that's characteristic here is it's a centralized organization. Usually, I do have some clients who are graphical, or they're geographical, but they're basically selling in Europe. So there's teams in Germany, France, England, US. But within each of those territories, the BDR or business development role is centralized. They're not sitting at a desk by themselves at home making phone calls. They're in a room with other people because the way that this works and the amount of calling that they do and their block time, which I'll show you later, really is better if they're in a group setting. Now, the other thing to look at is, and to think about, is the outbound only versus blend. And blend is outbound and inbound leads. Most of these organizations who are really focused on creating predictable revenue are going to have an outbound or outreach rep that just does that. There are some companies, though, that you'll see a blend. So one of your questions to ask a potential client is, how are they processing leads now, and what is the lead source? And that would give you a percentage, and I would ask them the percentage of inbound versus outbound versus trade shows versus workshops versus executive briefings or whatever they're doing, so that you get a feel for how strong the outbound program is. Now, here's an area that I want Max to chime in, because as we were thinking about, where is PandaDoc fitting and how can we use that tool, it's just a natural for playbooks. It's a natural for content assets to track the conversion rates. But the playbook, I thought, was really an area that you can offer a really nice service, especially if you're following the framework that we've been teaching you over the last 2 webinars. This lends itself to a really nice playbook that has the role-playing guidelines we talked about before. It has all that information we collected in webinar number 1, which is the SWOT, the process personas, the ideal accounts profiles, the objection handling that they're going to do, any scripts and templates for voicemails, for regular phone conversation, email templates that they're going to send hyper-personalized, because some of you are probably thinking, well, don't the templates reside in the marketing automation system? Yes, they do, but for certain types of hyper-personalization, there's going to be a library of templates that the rep will bring down, customize for his top 10, 20 clients, and send out on a personal level, one-on-one. Then we can also link to recorded calls, to training materials, presentations. It's all from a really active playbook. Then I'm going to show you this later on. There's actual required pipeline activities, there's goals, there's workflows, and all of this can reside in a beautiful playbook that's an active document that continually gets smarter as we start collecting the metrics from the documents itself. Do you agree, Max?
Well, I'm having a ball working through it because it tackles a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing here. So I have to thank you again for allowing us to share it with the audience here. I mean, this is the playbook, and these are the resources that we're sharing with audience members early next week. You guys will get an email, and you'll basically be able to go through this process either for yourselves at your own company, for your sales organization, or if you're a professional services provider sort of aimed at the sales productivity problem, then, well, here we are. Pick it up and run with it.
Exactly. And the last thing is that we'll have that stage-by-stage workflow so that you can actually track predictability and start developing your own predictable revenue formula for generating sales qualified opportunities. So I'm going to pull a couple of the managing areas from the book. There's 12, so this is like I say, fast and furious webinar, so I don't want to bore you with all 12. So I picked the ones that I thought were interesting and the ones that I see that people struggle with client-wise, but there are also areas of opportunity. Habit number 2 is the schedule. So this is what we were talking about before, this is the day in the life of a business development rep who's trying to generate between 8 to 10 qualified opportunities a month, where the sales conversation that the business development rep is in charge of is about 3 hours and 15 minutes. So what they're doing with that 3:15 is a 15-minute are we a fit call where they're determining fit, and then they may qualify on the same call, but more than likely they're going to set of time where they discuss the business needs of the main prospect, which is usually a 1-hour call. And then following that, they're going to engage with a team from the prospect side to go through a 2-hour discovery and qualification call. So it's beefier than probably a lot of clients that you work with have, but it is definitely the type of workflow that people are going towards with account-based selling. So if you run into that term, account-based selling, account-based marketing, this schedule that came from predictable revenue, and I've modified it a bit, is really all about that particular methodology of account-based selling. We want to build reps up to 2 hours of block time, which is over here on the left-hand side. Now, it doesn't have to be at a certain time every day. In fact, when we go back to that hiring thing that we talked about really briefly, the conscientiousness of a BDR or an SDR will recognize that there are best time to call blocks within a day, within a week. So they're going to move that 2-hour block around depending on when they think the best time to call is for their prospect persona. One of the big red flags that I see all the time when we hire SDRs is that if I throw this up here like this, they're going to do 9 o'clock every day, 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock every day. And it's like, no, you have to think outside the box, people. If you're working with the CEO, 9 o'clock is not a good time to call probably. 7:30 might be in the morning or after 5 at night. And so I look for that actually to see how the SDRs take this workflow and move it around, because it is in blocks, move it around to get the most return on effort. And that's what we're looking for as SDRs, to actually see this and say, hey, well, can I move this around? It's a natural thing to want to maximize your return on effort instead of just, being an engine where you start the same time every day and nothing happens. It's just like, no, take this block, move it around. These are one of the tests that I give the SDR when I'm onboarding. So this particular workflow is something that we recommend all business developers generate, and there may be an A-B model, but we're basically doing that call time daily, and the goal is to get 5 meaningful conversations every single day for the opportunity to generate 8 to 10 qualified ops a month. Here is my block time that I use when I'm in my home office. The areas in blue are work areas, so I work 2 hours on my intellectual property. I have about 2 hours a day with clients. I write, do a lot of writing for an hour, and then the rest of the time is either working out or walking dogs. But, the point is that I, myself, follow a block time. And you'll notice it's not, from 9 to 11 do this, from 1 to 3 do that. I move it around depending on what is most available and in a way that I can reduce my return on effort. I don't want to work hard. I want to work smart. Habit number 3 is planning. This is a playbook item, for example, and so is that other one, actually. Another playbook item is the goals for each stage, and this is from an active client of mine right now. The new working and qualifying are actually business development stages we use in the active pipeline. So those of you who are familiar with the CRMs, we're actually putting records in the new and cold, and when we find the right person, they get moved to the working status. When we've done our Are We a Fit call, they get moved to qualifying. And we have goals of how many to move out each week, and also we have goals of how our email and voicemails and sales conversations are working. And this is something that we work towards as a team. Habit number 8 is to record in the CRM. You'll notice that we have codes here that we invented for the different dispositions in each of the stages. That tells us and starts us on the path to creating a predictable revenue formula for generating qualified opportunities. It's very simple tracking that we do, but this, the last row allows us to identify lag, and then everything else above that tells us whether our email systems are working from a personalization point of view, whether the automated email is working, and then we also want to know how many phone calls it takes to get from initial conversation to qualified ops. So that third row down is all about the phone calls that we make and the type of phone call we make. I have this in place with all my clients now. And the last habit is habit number 10, to expand. One of the things we do in our world now is we incorporate a first and 10 into that daily workflow, which is a social referral engine. So all I ask the reps to do is each morning or each night, whenever we're in dead phone time, and we can use it as admin time, whatever the admin time is, reach out to 10 people in your network and either ask for a referral to second level if you're a LinkedIn person, or you can respond to a group, or you can respond or maybe do a discussion group, make a slide share that you present, tweet something out, whatever it is. The first and 10, do 10 of these a day. 10 times 22 a day is 220 expansion channels a month that the SDR is doing, and it only should take 20 minutes. So you can see we're building a lot of habit into this role, and the habit into this role is what guarantees our success in being able to create consistent, qualified opportunities that we can scale. The next section of that triad is process. I'm going to go pretty quickly through these. You will have the download of this particular deck, so you can go in at more detail. But really what we're looking for is leading and lagging indicators. We want to be able to use the metrics so that we can optimize our framework. We want to uncover any bad gaps or any gunk that we have in our pipeline and evolve towards a best practice for us. I mean, we can use benchmarks from others in our industry, but really our goal is to really hyper extend this so that we have our own best practice for whatever our sales model is. We also want to be able to prioritize issues that we discover, meaning if there's content issues, content asset issues, if there's sales skills issues, we want to be able to prioritize those so that we keep the team really at the cusp of knowing essentially everything they need to know in order to quickly move someone from cold conversation or first conversation or even follow-up conversation to the opportunity. We establish intra and inter-stage metrics as well. It's basically a machine where if you think of the pipeline as a freeway, the mile markers are the stages, and the mile markers are intelligent, and they're reporting back to us all the time so that we can make those mile markers even more intelligent as time goes on. So here's the predictable revenue formula. For those of you who have the book, it's on page 42 of predictable revenue. And it's really a very simple formula. It's the sales pipeline plus the average deal size plus time. And there's a question just came in about if audio is cutting out. So if anyone else is having a problem, let me know, because I'm on a cell phone, so I don't think there should be a problem.
I can hear you loud and clear, Marylou.
Okay.
But that's just me, so.
All right. Just making sure. Now, again, that activity goals at a glance is one of those areas that we look at for intra and inter stage. You can see these are the goals we're looking at. I won't bore you with the specifics, but the orange one are inbound leads, and the other three columns to the right are all outreach. And so this particular client of mine is a blended client where they're working MQLs as well as, which is marketing qualified leads for inbound, as well as having outreach. They work 250 emails a week. That's the goal, so 50 a day they're supposed to send out. And some of those are probably done by the marketing automation system, but some of those are also hyper-personalized, one-to-one email messages as well to their particular prospect list. Then we're looking at movement from stage to stage, that's the inter stage that we're looking for. And again, consistency rules the day here. So we may start at 10% movement, but we're working up to 40% moving up cold records to working, 45% moving from working to qualifying, etc. And the goal is at the end of all this is 8 to 10 qualified opportunities a month consistently per SDR. Here we go again with the same file that I showed you on the people side of things is the tracking at a glance. Here what I'll explain to you is if we look at the cold and new column, you'll see there's a RESP and FTRP. That you can envision that as a fork in the road. What we want to know is what is getting a record or a contact moving from this cold or new status to working. Is it our email engine that's getting people to raise their hand, which is really what we want, because we want kind of a while you're sleeping engine that people respond to so that the rep only has to follow up? Or does the rep have to initiate a find the right person call, meaning they have to map into the organization in order to verify that they've got the right person? That's the first major why that we want to know, because one of them is allowing automation to do our work for us. The second one, FCRP, is a human resource that we have to put in place in order to get to the next stage in the pipeline. So it's a really good spot for us to see if our email engines are not performing at the capacity and also at the performance level that we're looking for. And then we're also seeing, geez, we have to constantly use the phone because that's a human resource issue, and it's also a pipeline lag issue that we have to deal with. So these are why these very simple metrics tell us a lot of information. It tells us how many touches we need to do, what kind of touches they are, how long the touches have to be, and the duration of the pipeline from initial conversation to qualified op. Now I'm going to go through very quickly each of the KPIs that we use for each of those Qs, the cold, the working, the qualifying. And I'll just let them print out here so you can read them as they go. And as I said below, the activities, you can see, is it automation, is it human, or is it human hyper-personalization that's getting us from stage to stage to stage? Because obviously the more automation we can use, the better, and the less human resources. But that also means our email content, our content assets, our value props within the email body have to be spot on. But we can see that they're not performing relatively quickly because we have these KPIs in place. Here's the working queue. And again, the activities, these are the activities that are recorded by the BDR, SDR. They're essentially, if you're using something like a Salesforce tool, they're logging an activity record and they're putting a type code in. And it's usually a pick list. So they don't have to type anything. They just basically click on one of these types, and that helps us understand exactly what they have done and what the next steps should be. And last but not least is the qualifying queue. Now, some of you may not have a qualifying queue. If you're sitting out in the audience saying, boy, I just have my people generate meetings and that's it. Then if that's the case, they're going to stop at working and go from working to qualified opportunity. But if you're allowing the SDR to go further into the pipeline, which that happens if they're doing account-based selling, they're going to go further in, then you'll probably have a qualification queue. So here's some of the metrics for that. And again, you can see under the activities, the scoping 1 and 2 is that 3-hour 15 I was telling you about, where it's a 15-minute are we a fit call, followed by a 1-hour call with the main decision maker, followed by a 2-hour call with the team, the prospect team. And again, not all of you are going to have this. That's why being aware of all the different activities that could go on and then isolating it to what's going to work for you is the way to go. Now, if you're thinking that you're going to do some account-based selling in addition to what we call extended universe selling, which is anything that's not a top account, then you're going to have a combination of these types of activities. You're going to have some of the reps that are going to go further into the pipeline and take longer, and some that are going to be junior SDRs, if you will, and they're going to stop at the meeting. I encourage you, though, as your reps get smarter and they get more tenured, that before they become an AE, you get them into at least some of the scoping pieces, because that'll show you how well they handle themselves in a situation where they're trying to disqualify and also do a full discovery. Sample dashboards, very briefly. I do have, from Predictable Revenue, the dashboard that we use that I can put out as part of the download, Max, remind me, that have a team activity dashboard and a singular activity dashboard, but they are Salesforce, they're not HubSpot. Now here's a case study real quickly on a company called SalesLoft, Kyle Porter's company. And I'm just going to let you guys absorb this table. And this is basically what their reps do every day. I'll walk you down, but just kind of take a look at it. You know, they basically handle 35 daily leads on inbound a day, 700 leads a month for inbound. In the book in Predictable Revenue, we thought 400 was good, but they are obviously just doing something really well over there because they can handle 700 leads. Their lead to demo conversion rate for outbound is 3.7%. For inbound, it's 12.4%. They actually have to do 6 activities to secure that first meeting. So when we talked about before the rep logging the activity of what they did, this is a great indicator to know that it takes at least 6 activities before they get to that first meeting. So you can plan your pipeline lag. What this doesn't show us, which I like to see, is of those activities, what's phone, what's email, what's social. I want to know even further breakdown of what got us to that and what modality it was. The average lead lifetime in days for them is 11.3, and on and on and on. The last row is kind of interesting because SalesLoft actually does pre-recorded voicemail calls. So they have I think 5 voicemail templates that the reps can select from, and so they do use them. So that's a consideration you might be thinking about. If your resource for human resource is low, they can do these recorded voicemails and just set them up when it hits the voicemail engine. They turn it on. They can go on to the next call while it's still recording. Last but not least is technology, leveraging the right tools. Now, this is a picture I think I downloaded from the Inside Sales Stack. I can't remember what the vendor, but these are all the tools that you could possibly buy for your sales, inside sales folks. You can see it's a little bit overwhelming, so I think what we should talk about, rather than going through each individual tool, is the function of what the tool should do. And then once you define the function of the tool, then you can look at the form of the tool itself. So it's no different than defining your requirements and working through your pipeline. And also what we talked about is, what is your average deal size? How far into the pipeline do you want your business developers to go? And whether or not you're a phone shop, phone and email shop, or a phone immersion shop, as we talked about last week, there are 3 different kind of sequences that we use for business development. And so you understanding and mapping that out from a function standpoint will help you determine which tools are best for you. So for the cold and new queue, which is that first queue where we put our targeted accounts that we want to go after, I put on the left-hand side the tasks that we have to do, and then on the right-hand side, I put the function that the tool should do. So I'll just point out a couple of these for you. Again, this is going to be downloaded so you can take time to absorb it later. But we want to be able to, build an ideal prospect profile. That's so important for us. But how we go about building that, there are tools out there to help us discover and manage those people. So, LinkedIn, if you're selling B2B, that's one of my big ones that I look at. It also gives us an idea of how people describe themselves. So I actually cut and paste or copy and paste their profile definitions, and then I run a qualitative analysis on it so that I can see what words they're using to describe themselves. And then that gets handed over to marketing, as we're building out our content assets and our email bodies to make sure we're using the same language that overwhelmingly our prospects are using. So that's one of the tools that I do is, scrape as much as possible. And since I'm a programmer, I know how to get it all into a nice qualitative analysis tool and actually build a sentiment database if I wanted to, which is the verbs that they're using to describe themselves so that we use the same verbs and the same sentiment in our emails. That's one that's kind of cool to have right now are those tools. Then we want to be able to look at the right prospects to engage at the right time. That's predictive analytics, those tools. And then lastly, another interesting one is the actual contact sequence, what we talked about. Do we want to mass personalize everything, or are we going to hyper-personalize, which is we're going to take an email template and we're going to research about our guy and then put relevant information inside the body of the email, which means we're creating one email at a time, which is great for account-based selling, but if you're thinking about going to extended universe accounts where you're going to have hundreds that you're going to be sending emails to, it's very difficult to hyper-personalize those. So we want to make sure that our workflow automation tool will handle both the hyper-personalized or the mass-personalized, and also if we're blended, the automation tool should tell us when we should be making our phone calls. We shouldn't have to juggle that ourselves. That's like juggling, my friend calls it plate spinning. You just got all these plates going around and you're not going to be able to remember what's what. So the tool will help do that. In the working queue, which is the next queue down, and just the definition of the working queue is that we found the right person. We have now put our stake in the sand saying, okay, I'm ready to start this sales conversation because I know who I'm supposed to be talking to. It gets moved to working. And then the left-hand side, once again, are the tasks that we do. And then the right-hand side is the function of the tool. So I'll be silent so we can absorb this one. The last queue is the qualification queue. It's where we actually do the bulk of discovery calls, whether it's disqualification, scoping 1, which is a 1 hour with a decision maker, and then scoping 2 is what I call 2 hour with multiple decision makers. So we obviously need some document tracking tools. We need web conferencing probably tools. And then we are ready to go with engagement. So we're going to track whatever documentation we need in order to pass that lead along to the account executive. Or if we're working it from soup to nuts, we have the right documentation in place that we know that should move now to an opportunity, which means it's probably going to have some level of forecast applied to it. This gives us the ability to really look at the pipeline pre-forecast, post-forecast. And if you are working with a team that splits those roles, the sales roles, then we want to make sure that at least 90% of the work that we move from qualification to opportunity is accepted by the sales rep. One of the things that I think I heard in a previous PandaDoc webinar was the handoff is really important. And when I go into clients, that's the first thing I look for is if the handoff is less than 90%, then I know there's a problem with either the qualification process or they're not putting the right leads into the engine to start with, which means they don't have a good ideal account profile or ideal prospect profile. We shoot for 90% compliance, meaning that 9 out of 10 opportunities that get put into the opportunity queue are accepted by the reps who are going to work them to close. Other tools that are not discussed, but I think we all know them, but they're worth researching, is the CRM itself. What are you going to be using as your database to track this work? Any business intelligence and reporting on top of the engine itself, so that if you want to avoid Excel, for example, as being your reporting tool, find a business intelligence tool that connects all of the different technologies into one reporting engine. Mobile enabled, etc. So what we'll do is, if you're wanting to know more about this, we just covered chapters 7 through 9 of the book itself. And the other chapters in the book that we discussed in webinar 1 was 1 through 3. Webinar 2 was 4 through 6. And that's it for me, Max. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Yeah, so, I'll just recap what some of the expectations are for how people can get a hold of this stuff. I mean, Marylou, for years you've been delivering this predictable prospecting process to your clients one-on-one. You're a consultant, you've had a lot of success, and I think maybe one day you woke up and said, hey, people could kind of go through this themselves. You've got enough material, you've outlined your process well enough, and you have all the templates that, like, I know I'm not having any trouble walking through your process and just attending these webinars here. So, this idea behind your certification course and really getting people into an environment where they're not going to need to spend tens of thousands of dollars getting this work done. Instead, it's your intellectual property and your process that they can work through themselves. So that is your, I'll just call attention to that certification course you've got coming down the pipeline. And again, I can't thank you enough for using this webinar series as kind of the beta run of that certification course, and people can expect a good amount. I wouldn't say 100% of your templates that are going to be available through the paid course, but certainly everything people need to get started and start transforming their SDR organization.
Yes, what we included is most of what I call the critical paths for assembling the framework. And those are the documents that Max has actually been working as a student of mine, because he's right. I've been one-on-one for a very long time, since, the late 80s. I've been a one-on-one consultant. And so I'm not necessarily sure how this would translate to a group setting. But when we do the certification course, if we do get that moving, which I'm pretty sure we are, we're going to probably do a group level training where I have office hours, we have group discussions that we get together, because I think it's very important for me to be a part of your journey, even though we will probably offer a self-directed class at some point. We're going to start with groups of people, and especially since you guys are looking to other verticals to grow your business, I mean, this is a perfect time to put in a framework like this to reach out to the other verticals you're thinking about in a way that's systematic, that we know works, and the price points are such that I think that, even if it's a part-time outreach channel like what I do, it's going to be something that you can rely on for consistent revenue.
Well, thank you so much, Marylou. I look forward to, I'm about halfway through, I'm about 75% through part 1 myself. So we'll have to have a one-on-one call sometime next week. But for everyone on the call, have a great weekend. Look out for an email from PandaDoc with links to all of these resources that we've talked about over the last 3 weeks. And if you have questions, as you're going through this process, Marylou is the right person to talk to. And if you're wondering why the heck PandaDoc has an interest in this process, well, guess what? If you're not having personalized conversations during the sales process and you're not really doing this planning exercise and really putting together a blueprint, well, then a document tool like PandaDoc is really not going to be as effective as it could be. People that are getting the most use out of content automation tools like PandaDoc have embraced this need to look at opportunities in an account-based selling way and really personalize the conversation. And that's what content does. It enables better conversations and the follow-up to those. So have a great weekend. And Marylou, do you have your contact information here? Oh, it's just MarylouTyler.com for that matter.
Yeah, I thought I put it on here, but maybe not. Yes, you can reach me at MarylouTyler.com or my Gmail address is tyler.marylou, Marylou, maryloutyler@gmail.com. If you go on to my website, there is a maryloutyler.com/askmarylou, stuck together, lowercase, and that is a voicemail engine that you can leave me a 90-second voicemail of any question that you have, and I'll be happy to answer it for you.
Thanks so much, Marylou. You get some sleep this weekend.
All right. Thanks so much. Talk to you later, everyone.
All right. Thanks so much.